Okay, so what I'm talking about right now is a little, probably a little more close to home than I care to admit, right? But I wanted to talk real quickly, as quickly as possible, about Saul and David. And there was a time in my journey with the Lord. I wish we done made a talk about it, you know. I'm not trying to remember. I don't remember which video it was, but I was saying in that video that I think it was when I was talking about generational curses and how redeeming the bloodline to the Lord. So, like me to say, you have a like if the bloodline had a pattern of doing something like with a particular sin or whatever, to break that curse off of the bloodline as well as to stay in the bloodline and honor God, you can play around with that type of pattern of behavior because it may not be a stronghold for another bloodline, but it's definitely a potential stronghold for you, right? So even if you break it off of the bloodline, you continue playing around with it, it's gonna reinforce the stronghold, essentially, is what I was saying. There was a time in my life, I'm gonna be real frank, when I was studying this story that I'm gonna talk about, and I had to say to the Lord, Lord, please do not let the fate of Saul reach me. What I mean by that is that the Lord basically chose Saul. He was Saul was God's first choice. God could have chosen anybody else, and he chose Saul, right? He was of the smaller tribe, however, but that was a tribe for warriors, and he chose Saul as his first king of his nation. But Saul had issues. Saul had baggage that he did not bring to the Lord, and he kept, for whatever reason, I mean, ultimately it was pride because he kept disobeying the Lord, but the Lord saw that and read that as a pattern of rebellion, and he basically replaced Saul. Basically replaced Saul. So I remember praying to the Lord like that fate will not reach me, meaning the Lord will not, it will not be my testimony that I was the Lord's first choice, but because of whatever reason I kept being rebellious to the Lord, and so he had to replace me. The thing that was most chilling about God replacing Saul is that Saul himself did not live to see the replacement, but his bloodline did, right? Because when God chose him, God didn't just choose him as the individual, God chose his bloodline that was going to come from him when he made him king. And I think I was talking in a video where about repenting from God's perspective, where it said he repented for making Saul king because Saul just kept acting rebellious, right? I mean, there were times when, the Lord did send an evil spirit to torment him because his heart was not submitted to God. And I don't really want to focus on that for this video, actually. I like to look at the context of the stories in the Bible, but even if it doesn't fit my life specifically, I try to see what lesson I can get from it. So regardless of what, happened between him and God and David and all of that, that's their business. But what I got from it is that I can start out being God's first choice. But if I act a fool, God certainly has a replacement for me. And one day I was in reflection with God, and that really hit me real hard because of just certain things that I was wrestling with on account of my bloodline, by the way. And I was like, Lord, I do not want that fate to reach me, because when God spoke blessings to Saul, overall, when he spoke blessings or speaks blessings even today, it's not just to you, it's to your bloodline, it's to any people or place that he himself divinely assigned under you. under your dominion, under your power, under your authority. So when we act a fool, all of that is up for grabs, meaning God will bring in a replacement. There's this, I don't call it like I wouldn't say a theology, but there's this thought flowing around that in the kingdom of God, you are replaceable. I had an issue with that. But what the Lord basically said to me was, Him replacing someone is not because He wants to. He wouldn't have chosen them in the first place, but because He has to, based on how they're acting. So it is said not to say, oh, God is going to drop you at the, you know, point of a hat or anything. But if you continue to dishonor Him, if you continue to disobey Him, if you continue to rebel, He has to replace you. Because what's riding on your obedience is what He spoke. If He keeps you in your position while and by you I mean me, I'm kind of like ministering to myself too. If He keeps you in position while you continue to rebel against the very thing that you partnered with Him to do, you're making Him out to be a liar, and He's not a liar. He says in His word, He watches over everything that He speaks, so that to see that it is performed, to see that it does not come back to Him void. In order to do that, in Him watching over it, He may have to shuffle some pieces around. He may have to do some replacement around the place because people are not acting their position, right? I remember feeling so chill to my core about that realization. So even the video when I was talking about how or what it means when God says He repents for doing something, it's not that He took pleasure in it, but that was just a reality based off of what He said and did, what mankind said and did, right? So if it, just like you can start from First Samuel. Let me just start from First Samuel, just because everything is with a context, right? I don't just like giving the story, but I can tell you, I'm gonna put it in caption when God, the the people of Israel asked for a king. God is like, "Oh no, wrong for that." He read them their rights when they asked for a king, because God is like, "I'm your king. No, nevertheless, I'm going to give you a king." And his first choice was Saul. And I mean, I don't know. I never did it. I was not there, right? But somehow Saul ended up replaced. Because God takes kingdom and kingship very seriously. He does. And especially when He puts you in charge of a lot of people, like if He cannot trust you to lead His people, especially to lead His people to Him, or to lead His people to stay obedient to Him, um, what's the point of you? Like, what is the point of you being there? What is the point of Him putting you there, right? So yeah, I was just I was really shook by that. It's one thing to say, oh, the Lord doesn't take pleasure in doing this, like replacing you or whatever. But if you continue to act out or rebel or act out in your flesh and dishonor God and this, He's gonna replace you because it's necessary for Him to replace you. Because Saul probably was just wrapped up in his own self, but the Lord had him in charge of many souls. So it cost him, and it cost his bloodline. They were disinherited from knowing what it felt like to be ruler over Israel, right? Um, God had to bring in David, and the truth is, I was so convinced that even if David was not Saul's replacement, David and Saul would have met. I'm 100% convinced that the Lord still put David at Saul's right hand for a reason. for a unique reason. You understand me? One of the things I looked at as well is that when Saul met David, David was 15. That's when he fought Goliath. He probably met him before that. But he met him when he fought Goliath, and Saul himself would have already been an adult and stuff like that. But David was still a teenager. David, however, like when I saw this perspective, I was like, what? This is still tying back to the whole replacement thing, but it's showing that before the Lord replaced him, there was just so much that he was in position to do that he didn't do. I guess he was just consumed with his own issues. David himself, the only father he knew was God. Like, he was not honored in his father's house. Like, he was the one that was counted out, to the point when Samuel went to the house for the prophet. When the prophet went to the house to say, okay, I'm looking for the next king of Israel, they didn't even remember David. And David was out in the field taking care of sheep. Sheep is what, like, it was like a source of income and, food and whatever. They didn't honor him, but there he was taking care of the thing that would sustain them, either through money or through actual, food. Out there with dumb sheep. I did a video about sheep as well, where the Lord was my shepherd and he gave me a revelation about that. But there was David, the least in his father's house. He was the youngest. David was the youngest, least in his father's house, right? The only father he knew at this point was God. So I was thinking, what if God also had originally purposed to place David at Saul's right hand to feel some sort of fatherly love? Because when I looked at it, Jonathan, that's Saul's son, loved David with a brotherly love. Like the Bible, like I could just imagine, like Jonathan so cleaved to David's. That's how much love he had. That's how much love they had for each other. And I couldn't just help but wonder, what if God was trying to give David that sense of not just proximity to a leader, to the greatest king and all of that, and being the king's son-in-law, but what if God wanted to use Saul to, to show you fatherly love? But Saul couldn't get out of his issues. He was hiding in his baggage. He was people pleasing. He did what he thought was good and all of those things. And it was always in opposition to what God said. So Saul's bloodline lost any claim to the throne. David did not get an opportunity. If God had intended for him to get an opportunity to know what it felt like to be loved by a father, like a natural father, because Saul was actually his father-in-law, he didn't get that. Saul spent so much of his reign trying to kill David, it's not even funny. And his thing was, he got jealous when persons were praising David. Why would you get jealous? He got jealous and he thought David was going to replace him. And I'm saying, God may not have originally planned that or wanted that to happen, but God was prepared if he had to. And he clearly had prepared David, right? But like, what if God wanted to write a different story? Like, David never knew the love of a father. When David went to look for his brothers on the battlefield when they were faced off with Goliath and nobody wanted to fight Goliath, his eldest brother tried to belittle him. Where are your sheep? Where are you? His father sent him with food for the brothers. And because he asked what go on, the brother was like, where are you? I don't say mischievous and I get it. So David had there was no love lost between him and his father, because there was no love in the first place for it to be lost. Right? There was no love lost between him and his brethren, his actual brothers either. So I was just thinking, what if the Lord wanted David to have that experience? Even though he couldn't have it through his biological family, but through his marital family. But yeah, so I was thinking maybe the Lord wanted David to have that experience of family through Saul. I'm increasingly convinced by that, because Saul's son, that's Jonathan, like loved David like a brother, like literally, right? But Saul couldn't get out of his issues. And the man that God may have very well, so God didn't just put him over the nation of Israel, God put him in charge of like fathering David. And he spent so much of his reign trying to kill David. Like, it's not even funny. The man could even probably give enjoy a marital rights. Like, Tutu's he married. And then if I tell him, say, in father-in-law try kill him, he's not on the run. But yeah. So, and then he was eventually replaced by David. And it's easy to look at it, with like just from my flesh to say, see, the same thing with Saul to come through. Yeah, because he believed that, first of all, that may have been a lie or something that was said to incite the jealousy, which it did, that then made that prophecy come true. Because there's no way God promised you and your bloodline the kingdom of Israel if you obey him. Why would you automatically assume that because they were singing a song about David that he's going to replace you? God didn't just promise you, God promised your bloodline. But because of how he was thinking and he gave in to those thoughts, he acted like that. And Tutu's, what do you know, he was replaced. And God taught me something about honor. Like, God taught me honor, that deserved one video. But I wanted to say briefly what God taught me about honor is that David, however, no matter how Saul did try to kill him, David understood honor. Saul didn't. Because if you honored, you obeyed. And even if you honored but you disobeyed, you repented as quickly as possible and you go right back to obeying. David understood that. Saul didn't. He just kept disobeying. He just kept disobeying. God is like, enough. Like, you slip is a cha-cha slide. Okay? So, but what the Lord showed me was that David understood honor to the point where even though he had every right to kill Saul because Saul was trying to kill him, he never laid hands on Saul because he still saw Saul as God's anointed. This is after God himself had replaced Saul spiritually by anointing David, even though David wasn't yet on the throne. David himself still saw Saul as God's anointed, so he never lifted a hand. And even when he could, he proved to Saul that he could, and he didn't. David honored Saul, the same man that was trying to kill him. David honored him so much that even when people come tell him, say, like them come tell him, say, yes, such and such happened to Saul and whatever, David killed him. Because David is like, you think you coming to me with bad news about Saul means that you're doing me a favor? And he killed him. Imagine that. Imagine me going to David thinking I'm going to give him some news about Saul, expecting a reward. I don't live with my life. I don't live to tell the tale. That's how much honor David had for Saul. Because regardless of how Saul was acting, David honored God so much, he saw that God had already anointed Saul. And even when God replaced him by anointing David, he himself never took it up to be like, all right, I'm going to avenge myself. Never. You understand? So that is also a difference in why Saul was replaced. And the truth is, I believe that the Lord, I feel like Saul could have learned, but him just never like this. Him never like to tell him. Him never like to tell him. Like, Saul is a whole case in study. He's a whole basket case in study, because if he was alive today, the Bible say, like, some of the things that, some of the afflictions that he had, he would have been like the mad king, because he acted mad sometimes. Like, when he was prophesying and all of them, something, and him just go on and spit around the time, like, he would have been classified as a mad king, and he would have episodes of madness because of the evil spirit that was possessing him or tormenting him, right? So yeah, this video is not gonna be that long because I just wanted to drive home that, like, I mean, God did that talk. I know this. He was talking to me, but I said to him, that will not be my judgment day. That's not something I want to answer for under no circumstances. Oh, Tashika, you were my first choice, but because you kept rebelling me, I had to replace you with me. No, 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 no. No comprende. Go see me judgment day. No comprende. Because I can't understand what you mean by that. They're not, it's not mathing for me, right? But yeah, and I think, I know the Lord was trying to comfort me when he said, listen, I didn't want to replace Saul, but I had to. It's comforting, but it's not really that comforting. It is comforting because I know that he loves me and all of that, but why am I rebelling against him in the first place? So that he has to now factor in replacing me. Why? So yes, we are replaceable. It doesn't mean God takes pleasure in replacing us, but he absolutely will. That's what makes him sovereign, all-knowing, all-powerful, everywhere, all the time. Because we act a fool. We're not as reliable as we think. And by we, I mean me, right? But it was very bone chilling for me. There are very few stories in the Bible that do that. To me personally, that was one. Very bone chilling for me. And that, again, that did not just affect Saul, it affected his bloodline. So his sons didn't even get to feel what it felt like to be the ruler of their nation. Because he acted a fool when he was in position, and God is like, I'm not give your son, I'm not give nobody else in that generation here one next opportunity to be so. And he just replaced it with David. Then David himself invited the spirit of lust, and the spirit of lust did cause his own son to be disinherited, but David was left with one tribe. So even David's lineage ended up replaced, not because of what David did, but because of what one of his sons did. Like, there's so many sobering lessons to learn from the Bible. Like, I've never come out of the Bible and be like, yeah, God sounds like I should fool around with him. Nope. So yeah, I'm gonna leave this here for now. I might do a follow up with this. But yeah, it's a very sobering reality. It's very easy to say, oh, we're called and chosen by God. But there's a sobering reality. If we don't act how God called us to act, he's going to replace us. And that should chill us to the bones. Because it means we were his first choice, but we disqualified ourselves. And sin is like such a big disqualifier. It's not even funny, like, right? So yeah, I would just encourage us to consider that. Yes, we're called, yes, we're chosen, but we're very much replaceable. If God deems us unreliable, to bring about whatever he spoke or whatever he wants to do in the earth, we're very much replaceable. And he doesn't take pleasure in doing it, but he is God, so he has to do it. Right? So that's it for now.